The dream of every train enthusiast is to one day run a railway of their very own, commanding the rails with authority, deciding which trains will run and where they'll be going. The chances of this actually happening are astronomically slim, so we settle for the next best thing. Model trains. Model trains have been a thing for almost as long as trains have existed. Coming in various brands and sizes, they offer the modeler the freedom to create a world of their very own. The Bachmann-Thomas sets were my first experience with model railroading. These engines differed from my Tomy and Trackmaster engines as I could directly control their movement. I've always wanted to revisit model railroading and create a proper layout. HO has always been my preferred skill, but that was until I made a certain discovery. While cleaning out a storage unit, I came across this. The Lionel Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends electric train set. This is an extremely rare and discontinued set originally released in 1994. This isn't one of the few re-releases it had, this is the original 1994 set, and this wasn't the only thing I found. I also found the James the Red Engine train set. It's crazy to think that I own not just one, but both versions of these rare train sets. Thomas's iconic coaches Annie and Clarabelle came with his set, and two Chobsam trucks accompanied James. The models are definitely of their time. The detail varies in places, and they fall under the stigma of having faces that hardly resemble their shell counterparts. Even with that being the case, I still find these engines charming, and since I have these two sets back, I thought I might take the time to restore them to their former glory. The packaging is in rough shape, likely from various moves, but opening up the boxes reveals that the sets are mostly intact. The trains and rolling stock are here as well as the tracks. I'm missing the original controllers and some of the accessories, but the bulk of the set is still here. The manual shows that the set originally came with interchangeable faces, some figures, and a sound remote. I inspected the models for any damage. Thomas and James were missing their cab roofs, but otherwise seemed fine. Clarabelle was missing a wheel, as were both Chobsam trucks, and it seems that one of the couplers had broken. So just some missing wheels, two roofs, and a coupler. This all seemed pretty manageable, so I began searching for replacement parts. Luckily, I was able to find most of the parts I needed on a model train website. The only thing I didn't find were the roof pieces, but I'll touch on that later. While I waited for the parts to arrive, I began looking into power supplies. Like I said, I didn't have the original controllers, but I did have this. The RailPower 1370 Transformer. We used this as a replacement controller as I think we lost the original. The controllers seemed to be in working order, however I didn't have any of the wires to connect it to the track. The controller requires wires with Fort connectors to power the track. I couldn't find any wires for sale with Fort connectors, so I considered buying the connectors and the wires separately and connecting them myself. Before I went ahead with that though, I searched up Lionel controllers, and I found one practically identical to the ones in the set. The best part is I was able to buy it for about $15, which is relatively cheap for what I'm getting. The wheels and coupler came soon after ordering the controller. The installation was fairly simple, although I did run into a problem. After several minutes of trying to install the wheels on the Chobsam truck, I realized that the wheels I had gotten were too big, so I had to send it back. Fortunately, the wheels did fit for Clarabelle, so it wasn't a total loss. I scoured eBay looking for the roofs for Thomas and James. I found a lot of things, but a roof was not one of them. I considered using the roof from the Lion Chief Thomas model, but measurements proved that it would be too small. The only way it seemed I could get these pieces would be to buy a new model and take the roof off of there. This wasn't ideal, so I opted to forget about the roof and carry on. With those parts installed, I figured I should clean up the models. They're in need of a serious cleaning considering they've been untouched for several years. I took some isopropyl alcohol and thoroughly ran a Q-tip around the wheels of each engine. After that, I moved to the tracks, which needed a bit more care. By this point, I began to wonder how the trains would perform. They worked last I had used them, but that was several years ago. When the controller arrived, I set up a portion of track and gave the engines a run. Though a little sluggish at first, Thomas seemed to be working fine. James, on the other hand, had some issues. He would constantly stutter and stop and only seemed to work when pressure was applied to the wheels. I ended up taking apart and reassembling James, and through much trial and error I got him in working order. With both trains functioning properly, I set up the full track and gave them a proper run. The circle track was a bit small for my taste, so I decided to extend it. Both sets only came with curved pieces, so I had to buy some straight track, turning this circle into an oval. I definitely want to further expand this track and use the remaining curved pieces I have, but for now, this track will suffice. So the Thomas set is more or less complete, only leaving James to deal with. As mentioned earlier, I had gotten the wrong set of wheels for the Chobsam trucks and needed to order another one. I did this 3 times. I bought 3 different sets of wheels, each one too big for the trucks. Apparently these smaller wheels used for the trucks are not as common as the larger ones. I was able to move the wheels from one truck to the other giving me one functional truck, but I still needed the other to complete the set. Since it seemed buying the wheels outright was not an option anymore, I instead needed to buy an entirely new truck. These large-scale models are pretty pricey, but I was able to buy 2 trucks in pretty good condition for about $40. And with that, the James set is complete. Not only that, but he now has an additional 3rd truck. This would be the end of my restoration if not for one thing. I was missing a handful of accessories, none of which were necessary, but were nice things to have. Luckily, Lionel made an accessories pack, which I was able to find on eBay. When it arrived, I was pleasantly surprised to see it came in the original packaging, even if a little worn. The pack came with 3 figures, Sir Topham Hatt and Thomas's driver and fireman. The figures are really nice and look pretty close to their TV show counterparts. They're small enough to fit in the engine's cab, and with the base plates they can stand on their own. It also came with 3 faces for Thomas that closely resemble faces he's made in the show, as well as a playmat, half of which I already owned. But the thing I was most interested in was the sound system. I don't ever remember owning it, so I was curious to try it out. However, the sound system ended up being a bust. I opened up the remote and found about 25 years of battery corrosion. I cleaned it out to the best of my ability, but the contacts seemed a bit too far gone. After a day of fiddling, this was the best I could get it working. I would like to get this working one day, but I'm not too worried about it right now. 2 months later and over $200 spent, Thompson James are now restored. It's nice seeing these engines run for the first time in years. This really takes me back to when I first got these sets. Though tedious at times, this was a fun project to take on. Researching parts, making repairs, and troubleshooting problems made this exciting, and it really reinvigorated my interest in model railroading. When I get a little more space to work with, I definitely want to expand my layout into a proper railroad. I'm so glad that I saved these sets when I did. They're hard to come by these days, and you'll be paying quite a lot to get your hands on one. Anyway, thanks for following my endeavor to fix up these old engines. It's been a blast, but this is where I'm ending the video. Hope you guys enjoyed.